What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Build with the CEO. My name is Trevor. I'm the CEO of Coach Catalyst, and I'm excited to be here. It is 12 o'clock on a Tuesday, and just like every other Tuesday, we're here helping you learn a little bit about coaching, about business, about Coach Catalyst, about it all. And today, actually, really all this month, we are talking about workouts. So we're going deep into workouts, and I'm sharing a lot of my kind of personal experience around programming and workouts and what we're doing in the facility across our gyms. And episode 1 was about assessment. So talked a little bit about our assessment process and how we're systemizing that across coaches. And today we're going to talk about systemizing programming. Now, programming really was the bane of my existence for a really long period of time, longer than I care to admit. And we've went through the evolution of programming where we started with Excel and then we went to Google Sheets and we built out all these kind of custom sheets to make things easier. And that was a step in the right direction. Then we ultimately moved to another platform, a technology platform, because Coach Catalyst didn't have workouts yet. And then finally landed on Coach Catalyst. And now inside of Coach Catalyst, we've finally, I shouldn't say gotten all the way there from a system standpoint, but we're about 90%, 95% of the way there from a system standpoint. And just to give you an idea on why this is so beneficial in our business is it used to take about 20 to 30 minutes to program for a client for their next kind of 6-week phase, right? Because we were really starting from a blank slate. Like, what are we going to do with this client, right? And that started to speed up as my ability to create programs improved. But when I started to hire other coaches, it was almost impossible for them to program the same way that I wanted them to program because they were relying on their own experiences. And we didn't have a great system in place to be able to essentially take what's in my head and in the templates and things that I've developed and now let them do that. And then we got there a little bit with Google Sheets, but it was still kind of a mess. And it still wasn't systemized. We maybe took programming down from 30 minutes to 15 or 20 minutes a program. And now we've got it down to where it can take less than 5 minutes to program for a client. If they're a pretty straightforward client, no major issues, orthopedic issues, like it takes less than 5 minutes. If they've got some orthopedic things that we have to think through, or they need some very specific exercises, then it might take a little bit longer than 5 minutes. But I would say we average at this point about 5 minutes per client. Now, if you multiply that by a couple hundred clients, right, that's significant time saving, right? Even at 100 clients, if it takes 30 minutes to program for a client, this is just for easy math, right? That's 50 hours of programming that potentially has to be done every month. Right? It's almost it's almost a part-time employee that's just doing programming. And you can see where this became very frustrating because my coaches were having to spend 2-3 hours a week, maybe longer, programming for clients. And that's 2 to 3 hours that they're not doing something else that's beneficial for the business. That's not driving growth. It's really just providing the experience for the client. And I don't think us spending 2 to 3 hours on programming a week actually provided any better experience. That's the thing. It was just a necessary piece of the process because I did not have a good system and process in place to make that easier. And we still wanted to operate from an individualized programming model. I did not want to operate from here's the workout for the day, and then we're going to scale every exercise up or down depending on that client. Our client base is just a little bit too diverse. We're going to have 16-year-old athletes in the same session with 75-year-old grandmas. And to try and scale that was just too challenging. And I'm not in a community where I can niche to a very specific population and just have enough of those people. So we've got too many new knees, new shoulders, this hurts, that hurts. It would have been really challenging for a coach in that moment to have to make all of these changes. And so this is what we came up with. And today I'm really going to share with you the foundations of that system. And then for you, you have to decide what is your system. And if you are just a single coach right now, online, offline, doesn't matter. You coming up with your system now will make life in the future much, much, much better. And if you do end up hiring hiring is going to be easier because you're not going to have to necessarily hire someone that has the same level of talent as you from a programming standpoint. They just need to implement what you've already created. And so it allows you to hire a slightly different type of person, which is super helpful, right? Because we know in this industry, especially in the offline face-to-face world, that personality, right, your ability to connect with people matters way more than the certifications that you have, or the knowledge that you might bring. It's more about how much you care. And sometimes those aren't always hand in hand. The person that's the most knowledgeable isn't always the person that cares the most, and they may not be the best person for the business. So today we're going to walk through that system, and there's really 4 parts to that system that I believe that you need to systemize in order for you to have a really effective programming system. And I'm going to be talking about it through the lens of Coach Catalyst. It's what we use at Functional Fitness, and I hope that you use it as well. I think it's the best platform out there in operating in this manner where we're serving the whole client. But today we're going to talk about workouts. So let's talk about the first piece of workouts that you have to systemize. And these are all layers that they build on top of each other. So at the very base layer of workouts is an exercise. Okay. There is literally an infinite number of exercises that you could program, right? You and I could go back and forth, right, with squat variations for a really long time. A really long time, because there's so many variations. There's foot positions, there's load positions, there's high, low, medium, kettlebells, dumbbells, tool, like speed, like tempo. All there's so many factors that go into this, and so like really, there's almost an infinite number of ways to do something. So when there is an infinite number of ways to do something, how do we systemize that? Well, we have to kind of put that into a box, right? Doesn't mean that that box can't change, but we have to start with a box. So as a coach, you have to decide on what is your exercise library. Okay? What exercises do you feel confident in teaching? Do you feel confident in effectiveness? Right? Because I could give you 2 exercises, right? And one is probably going to be better than the other one for XYZ reason, right? And so that's part of your coaching methodology. And so you have to decide, what exercises are we going to have in the squat, right? What are they called? And much of this is going to come from your training. If it's traditional training through one of the kind of the major certifications, or if it's, maybe outside, maybe you have a lot of like primal move training or things that aren't necessarily follow kind of mainstream strength conditioning, right? And so you have to really define your exercise database in whatever makes sense for you. For us at Functional Fitness, we think about it in a movement standpoint. So we've got knee dominant, hip dominant, vertical, horizontal pushes and pulls. And then we have our core broken down into anti-rotation, anti-extension, anti-lateral flexion, anti-flexion, and then a few other kind of variations on that. So we have our buckets, right, that our exercises occur in. And then inside of that bucket, we have, all right, here are our best variations inside of that bucket. I think this is a good way to start thinking about it, rather than just like picking and choosing every exercise under the sun. You're like, okay, in the knee dominant or in the squat bucket, okay, what are the variations that I feel really confident in? I can coach it, right? There's regressions, there's progressions to it, right? It serves a really strong, like, there's a lot of bang for the buck with that particular exercise. It's not just something random, right? So we start with this base layer of exercises, right? And that might be 100, it might be 200, 250, right? But we start with this base layer of exercises because that's where every workout stems from, right? Is your exercise library. So we have to define our exercise library. At Coach Catalyst, we give you an exercise library, but it may not, honestly, it's probably not the best library for you because there's going to be a lot of exercises in there you just really never use. So you can choose to keep them in there, right? Or you can choose to spend an afternoon and go through the database, right? Go through the database and dial in your exercise library. Okay. And then you have to choose. There's a few things that I would really try to figure out when you are building your exercise library is naming nomenclature. I think this is really important, right? Because we have tool, we have position, right? We have name of the exercise. So to give you an example, we would have potentially a, let's call it half rack kettlebell, right? So position and tool, half rack kettlebell. We might have a staggered stance squat, right? Or a kickstand squat. So all of these mean something. And so you have to figure out what your naming nomenclature is. Typically for us at Functional Fitness, we follow a tool first because I want the client to know what tool they're going to be using: kettlebell, barbell, dumbbell, anything like that. And then we do positioning second, right? So cable, and then it's half kneeling, and then it's one arm horizontal row, right? And so we go tool, positions, right? Where is that tool position? Where is the weight position? What is the foot position? All of those, and then exercise name. Okay. And so that's what the nomenclature we follow pretty consistently. Inside of Coach Catalyst, you can add tags and those kind of things to different exercises. So if you want something to be tagged as a horizontal pull or a vertical pull or anything like that, you can do that. But it's worth spending an afternoon going through your exercise database and deleting the things that you don't use. Doesn't mean that you can't add them in later, but delete the things you don't use and start from the things that you know you're going to use over and 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 over again. And then you can build from that database and say, hey, I need a new exercise for this. Cool. It that can go in my database. And then I know, hey, I need to create a video for that exercise. I got to put it in there, description, whatever those things are for you. Right. But I want you to start from like your MVP, your minimal viable product from an exercise database. Now, you might be a solo practitioner right now, and this is the perfect time to do it because then if you bring someone on, they have guardrails on what they can program from. Okay. Here are the exercises that you can program from. You don't get to pick some random thing off of Instagram or things like that. These are the exercises that we found to be tried and true. They've they've lasted the test of time, and they are what we understand how to program. Now I know as a coach, I know what to teach that person. They need to know every exercise in our database. They need to be able to go through it. They need to be able to explain it, teach it, regressions, progressions, all of that kind of stuff. Right. And so we have this exercise library to choose from. Now, I'm going to kind of give you a personal antidote. We actually are going back through our exercise library because it has gotten overloaded. Over the course of the last 5 years, people have been creating whatever they've wanted. And so our exercise database is actually really messy right now. And we're going back through it and we are ripping the band-aid off on a bunch of things and really deciding whether or not that is an exercise that should be in our database. Okay. More exercises in your database isn't necessarily better, especially if you have a team, right? Because what happens if I programmed for a client and I picked these random exercises off of YouTube? I thought they looked awesome. And so I'm going to put them in this client's program. Now I'm sick that day and someone else is filling in for me. Okay. That coach is looking at that client's program and they see an exercise that they have never heard of before, doesn't have a video for it. So they don't have any context. It's got some random name, right? Probably some Eastern Bloc country is in it. Right. And they're like to the client, like, I don't like, have you ever done this before? I've never seen this before, right? Whose authority is basically downgraded in that situation? The coach, right? Because I went and grabbed something random off of YouTube and then someone else had to try and coach it. I made that coach look like a fool because they don't know it. And so that client in the back of their mind, conscious or unconscious, is kind of questioning that coach on whether or not they have the authority or they should be giving them the respect that they did before that, right? Because me as the owner, right, I may know something that that coach doesn't know. And now I'm making that coach look like a fool in front of the client. And that is the absolute worst thing that we can do if we have staff, right? We need to, at every moment, be showing our clients how smart, awesome, intelligent our staff is. And this is one of the fastest ways to undermine, right? And this is maybe a little bit of an obscure example, but these things happen and they happen to me across my facility. But if you have a centralized database of these are the exercises we teach that we're good at, now I can program anything in that database. And I'm confident that every coach inside of my facility can execute that stuff at the absolute highest level. They can regress it, they can progress it, they can teach it, they can explain it, right? They look like a rock star. So if you don't have any staff yet, right, now is your time to start building out your system, right? So yeah, it may feel cool to have, hey, a 5,000 exercise database, but like, to be honest, like you don't need 5,000 exercises, right? You need the 180 that you do over and over and over and over again. And then you can gradually build on that database if you need to, right? Personally, for us, we use the details as a way to describe things like tempo or percentage of 1RM or reps in reserve or things like that. We're not creating new exercises for that kind of stuff, right? Some coaches will even just have the main exercise and then the stance or the position, potentially even the implement, things like that. They'll use the details for that because they don't want so many exercises. They don't want a goblet squat, a half rack squat, and overhead squat. They just kind of want a squat, and then that goes in there. So you have to kind of decide on what is your programming. At FF, we go implement, position, exercise name. That's the typical order that we'll follow. And we want to keep it in that order as we go along. So much of my knowledge is heavily influenced by people like Todd Durkin, Alan Cosgrove, Mike Boyle, right? I was very heavy in the strength and conditioning world and still am. And so those guys have really built the foundation of my thinking around programming. So my programming looks actually very similar to theirs, right? Just with our own wrinkle on it at this point. And then from there, from an exercise standpoint, then we go up the next layer, and that's what we call a block. So let me actually just show my screen here a little bit, just so you guys get a visual on it, and you're not just kind of staring at my face the whole time here. So give me 1 second to share this guy. All right. Okay. So I'm just going to show you guys where this stuff lives in Coach Catalyst, just so you can see it. But inside of Coach Catalyst, underneath programs, underneath workouts, you're going to see exercises. So here is the exercise list, right? You're going to see this is a demo account, but I have 1,700 exercises in here. Okay. Probably don't need that many, but you see that list right through here. So this is the list that you're going to start to curate, right? And make sure that it's dialed in. Okay. Do I need to do a half kneeling dowel twist plus knee anchor? If I don't know what it is, I probably just need to remove it. And then you can always add these back in as you're programming for clients down the road. Okay. So that's our base layer of exercises. The next layer up is going to be a block. Then we go to a workout. Then we go to what we call a program. So let's talk about a block next. And I'll explain kind of how I think it makes the most sense to do some of the stuff here as you're going along. But let's just talk about what a block is. So a block is essentially a sequence of exercises that's already predetermined. I think blocks are incredible for things like a warm up, right? We don't need 15,000 warm ups, right? You probably need about 5 or 6 that you can then tweak for the client. Right. If you use, like, let's say an FMS, functional movement screen, you might have one for active straight leg raise. You might have one for shoulder mobility. You might have one for the client that can't get on the ground. You might just have a general one. You might have an athlete one, right? But we would develop a warm up. But when I'm programming for a client, I don't want to have to write out that warm up every single time. And I also don't want to have to like copy another program that has that warm up in it and then to delete everything, right? That's where a block comes into play. So let's see if I have any warm-ups in this particular demo account. Let's see if I have a ramp in here. Sure, I've got one active straight leg raise ramp. We'll see if it's any good. So here's a block, right? This is not a workout, right? This is just a block. It's a section of a workout. Think about it as like when you build a workout, think about like you're building a house with Legos and you're putting all these Legos together to build the house, the workout. A block is like one Lego in the whole house structure, right? So a warm up is like a block, a section, right? So this particular one, we got some crocodile breathing, we've got some self-myofascial release, proximal hamstring, we've got a yoga flow, we've got banded squats, stick deadlift, dislocations, yada, 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 right? And so we have this built out. So now when I'm building a workout, I can just add this. But if you're new in your journey, or if you're moving programming over from somewhere else, you start building your blocks. Okay, what are the things that I use over and over again in workouts that if I just had it already done, it would save me time? Because you're going to see that we can set sets and reps right through here, right? We can set a description for that block if we want to. And it doesn't need to be circuits, right? It could be something like this too, where we're doing supersets, trisets, things like that. But think about it as just like a section of a workout. I'll give you another one, energy system development. I think this is another one where we can easily utilize blocks. So here would be like an anaerobic 852 circuit, right? We've got all of the exercises in here already predetermined. Doesn't mean we can't change them after we've assigned them, but they've been predetermined. So they're all ready to go right through here. Okay. And so that's what we consider a block. I think really, really good use cases for a block are going to be things like a warm up. I think corrective exercise sequences are awesome. If you do things for pain, if you kind of follow, I don't remember which group this is, NASM or whatever, where they go, where it's typically like tissue release and then, excuse me, it's like tissue release and then mobilization of that particular area and then stabilization of that particular area and then strength development. So you may have 4 exercises that are all working on a certain area. And you might have like very similar what that flow is, right? And so you could have that flow already built out here so that I can just add that flow in. If you have a great flow for a low back tweak, another really good one is just corrective exercise sequences, right? You have what's your protocol if someone has shoulder issues, right? What are we going to be giving them? And we can have that stuff mapped out in advance. Doesn't mean we can't change them in the future, but they're just mapped out in advance. Okay, so that's what we would call a block. I think this is one of the major efficiencies in program development, especially swapping things out. And then finally, we have a workout. Okay, so a workout is literally a single instance of a workout. So I'm just going to show you one here just so you can kind of start seeing it all put together. So we're going to go strength. Here we go. Phase 1, hips, workout A, strength. Okay. So right in here, you're going to see here is a workout. There's no warm up in this one. You could have a warm up in here, but this one doesn't. So we have our power core area. Then we have our strength block A, and then we have our strength block B, and then we've got some fixed power intervals. Okay. And so you're going to see that all is in here. Exercises are built in, right? Sets, reps. We've got some RPE stuff in here as well, but it's all built out, ready to rock and roll. And that is a workout. So I could assign this workout. I can make the workout repeat, but it is still the same thing. It is a workout. Okay. Which is kind of the next piece, right? We start building our workouts. And so from workouts, we then build programs. But another way that I think about programs is phases. Okay. And this is truly where we have created a ton of efficiency. Where we used to be programming like, hey, I'd grab strength, phase 1, strength A, put that on the client's account. Strength 1, phase B, put that on the client's account, make it repeat, make changes, all that kind of stuff. And so that worked, but that really didn't get us to the efficiency that we wanted. So ultimately what we got to was building programs. One way to think about this in a workout world is creating phases. So like phase 1. So inside of this test account, let's see if I have phase 1. All right, let's go. Let's do this one right here. So we're going to go Monday, Wednesday. Where's my Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Hold on a sec. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Let's search by that. Phase 1 beginner. Okay. So at FF, at our facility, we have phase 0 all the way through phase 10. Each phase is 6 weeks long for our 2 times a week clients. If they're training 3 times a week, each phase is 4 weeks long. Our goal is about 6 exposures to a workout before we get something new. Okay. And then we have kind of progressions through that I can talk about in future episodes if we feel like that would be interesting to talk about. But we're going to look at this phase 1, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, beginner. We always name ourselves or name our workouts and our phases as, sorry, not our workouts. We name our phases, our programs as Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, or 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And that's because if I have a client that trains Monday, Wednesday, I would assign them the Monday, Wednesday workout. If I have a client that trains Tuesday, Thursday, I would assign them the Monday, Wednesday workout because there's still a 1 day gap in between. If they train Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, then they get the Monday, Thursday one because there's a 2 day gap in between for that particular client. And then our clients will layer on cardio phases if that's something that they're working on as well. So clients can be on multiple programs. So we would layer on those cardio phases. We don't have that necessarily part of their base. That's either 2 or 3 times a week because that's just the majority of clients that we're working with at the moment. Okay, so here's an example. This is phase 1, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. In here it says beginner, but we just call ours phase 1. So in here, you're going to see a Monday workout repeated for 4 weeks. You're going to see a Wednesday workout repeated for 4 weeks. And you're going to see a Friday workout repeated for 4 weeks. Okay. And so the workouts are already built out. You're going to see a warm up. You're going to see this. And we do this thing called corrective. We just put that in as an exercise. So that lets our coaches know that they're just going to swap out for the correct corrective for that particular client. Sometimes we just put one in here as well, and then our coaches know. But for the vast majority of our clients, we just, or for our templates, we put in corrective. So then the coach can just swap it out when it gets to the client level. We're not at the client level yet, right? We're still at the phase level. So this is just something we're building out for them. And then we have their Wednesday workout. Again, same thing. You're going to see this thing is all built out, ready to rock and roll. And then we have our Friday workout, right? Ready to rock and roll through there. So we have all, what is this, 12 workouts here ready to go for this particular client, or I should say for this particular phase. So we want to think about our clients, and especially when we're developing templates around programming is in buckets. Okay. So we have like our general population client. Maybe we have our, if we're dealing with maybe a competition type client, maybe we have our, our bikini program or our bodybuilding program or our athlete development program. Like all of these are programs, but everyone kind of falls into buckets. And so how I tell most coaches to think about programming is just think about your normal everyday client, right? That's in that bucket. And then build out 5-10 phases for that particular client. And that's going to be your general outline. And now we can adjust that for each client that comes in based upon orthopedic issues, all of the things that factor into them doing a workout on any given day, right? But we start from that baseline. And that's where a lot of the efficiencies come into play, is starting with that template, right? And this is that template right here. And now I can take this and I can assign it to a client. The next step that we made with this, we used these templates, these programs, and we started to add in other little elements to it. One of them being a message. So after their first week, we actually added in a message that was templated. We would do something like this, right? Hey, first name. Remember, never send a message on the hour, on the quarter hour, on the half hour. Pick a really random time. We're gonna do 7:40, actually 7:39. And then, hey, we just completed, right? Week 1 of a new cycle. How is the body feeling? Right? Any changes that need to be made, right? So we just do something really simple and quick, and we call this a check-in, right? Really something simple. Come on. There we go. So right in here, we're going to add that in. Now you're going to notice that populates inside of this program. It's right there, right? So now when I assign this, it'll assign that message too. We then also, on their last week, we do a form. I don't know if I'll have the form in here, and I'm not going to recreate it, but we call it a cycle review form, but we'll just do like a weekly check-in one. We do a cycle review where we have them give us feedback on how their program or how the last 4 weeks went, and anything they want for the upcoming cycle, that kind of stuff. So that gets in here. Again, programmed automatically. And then we also put a message on this day typically too. And I'm just going to grab a random one here that prompts them to fill out that check-in. Okay. So we build out everything that we want for that particular phase, right? The foundation of that phase right here. And then that allows us, we'll just save this particular program. That allows us to, hey, I get a new client. They train 3 days a week. I'm going to go into that client here. So let's open up a new client. We're going to open up that client and we're going to assign phase 1 to them. Okay. So let's find a client that doesn't have any Santa Claus. Santa Claus is getting ready for winter, needs to get jacked, getting ready to go. Oh, he's got some stuff on his account, but we can delete it here. Let's just delete that from Santa Claus. We're putting him on some new stuff. Okay. So we're coming into Santa Claus here. He's going to start next Monday on his Monday, Wednesday, Friday, phase 1, right? So phase 1 beginner, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Sweet. Now I'm going to assign that, and you're going to see now that populates everything right there. We see all of the workouts. Now you see my little weekly check-in. You see my little message there. We should see that message after week 1 as well, right through there. And so that makes it really streamlined and systemized, because now my coach can come in and now they just make some modifications. Hey, Santa needs a corrective here, needs to work on his deep squat. We're going to do toe touch to deep squat, right? 8 reps, right? He's going to do 8 times that, 3 sets. Sweet. And then we're going to save this. And now I'm going to save this event and forward. It's another efficiency, right? Rather than having to go through all 4 of these Monday workouts and save each one, I save this event and forward. And I do want to disconnect it because it's no longer the same as the one that lives in my library. This is specific to Santa because I made changes to Santa. Now, if you don't want to make any changes to the workout, but you still want to make changes, you still don't want to be connected, you can also just add their name into the title, and that will disconnect it as well. That way, if you do make any changes to that global workout, it doesn't make any changes here. That's an easy way to just disconnect it. Okay. So that one's going to be in there. And then I go into the next one, right? And I make those changes for Santa here. So this prevents us from having to start from scratch. And this is why I said it takes us about 5 minutes to do stuff, because the vast majority of stuff is done, right? We have that particular template set out. So we have their workouts for the week or for the month are set out. Any pre-programmed messages there, any pre-programmed forms are there. Everything is there. And then we can just move it around if we need to. Hey, I want this to go out on Sunday. I just move that message to Sunday for that particular client, right? Hey, I want my check-in form to be over here, like at the end of the week. Cool. Like, let's just move it over here to the end of the week. You just drag and drop things around. So it makes it really, really simple to personalize. So hopefully that gives you at least some framework here on how we are thinking about programming. So we think about it in layers, right? At the base layer, we have exercises, and we need to define our exercise library because that's where everything starts. We want to have a consistent exercise library. Yes, we can grab random stuff off of Instagram and things like that, but we should have a little checklist of, okay, I'm going to add a new exercise. I need to have a video for that exercise. I need to have a description, and it needs to be named correctly. If I have staff, everyone needs to understand how to teach it, right? So base level exercise library. Next level up is blocks. Blocks are like your ticket to building workouts quickly and efficiently. Warm-ups, corrective exercise sequences, energy system development, right? Anytime the sequence of exercises is very similar, right? That's what we're going to build blocks for. Because then when I build a workout, I can build blocks. I can just use the blocks. Remember, building a house, little Lego blocks. Each block is like a Lego block, and building this workout, building the house. After that, we have the workout component. And then finally, we have the program component. Think about it like a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, and that client's journey. And then we can just reuse those things over and over and over again. Okay. So when you start to build in this manner, you become extremely efficient, and programming takes literally 0 time at all. We went from having to spend hours and hours, probably 3 to 5 hours a week in programming, to our coaches then spend less than an hour to get all of their programs ready to rock and roll. The efficiencies are incredible. It takes a little bit to get it built. Like, it takes effort and time to build it, but once it's built, like, extremely, extremely efficient. And if you are a brand new coach or you're moving stuff into Coach Catalyst, you can save this stuff as you go. As you're building a workout, you can save the blocks. As you build workouts, you're saving the workouts. So those are populating your database. If you're in a block and you click the little gear, you're going to see a save as template on the right-hand side. Save that block. So when you're building, make sure you're saving things as you go along, right? And you're just going to become extremely efficient as a coach. So hopefully this was helpful. This episode went a little bit longer than I normally do on these episodes, but there's a lot of meat here. And I think if programming is a core part of what you do, starting to systemize it is going to save you a ton of time. And then you can choose what you want to do with that time. Is it going and getting more clients, right? Is it engaging at a deeper level with your current clients? Is it building out more templates, right? More phases so that you're not having to get a new client and think about, hey, where do I start with this client? So hopefully this is helpful. Definitely ask questions as they come along. Facebook, the Facebook group is the best way to do that. Just make sure you tag me. Until next week, we'll see you again here. My name is Trevor, CEO of Coach Catalyst. See you next week on Tuesday. Later.